It's the Opperman Report. Join digital forensic investigator and PI Ed Opperman for an in-depth discussion of conspiracy theories, strategy of New World Order resistance, high-profile court cases in the news, and interviews with expert guests and authors on these topics and more. It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. You can find me at Opperman Investigations and Digital Forensic Consulting, either by going to my website, emailrevealer.com, or you could just email me at oppermaninvestigations@gmail.com. And our guest today, David Wheeler, from American Muckraker, PAC Incorporated. You could find him over there on Twitter. Oh, I screwed this up. Where's the Twitter? American Muck on Twitter, and the website is AmericanMuckrakers.com, and he's the one that came up with all that information on that Madison. Who's that guy? Madison? Who's that?
Madison Cawthorn.
Yeah, Madison Cawthorn. I was going to call him Hawthorne. Yeah, and so David Wheeler. Remind the audience who David Wheeler is.
Well, I'm a North Carolina resident, father of 3 kids, and muckraker in chief. I'm trying to get voters to realize that their politicians aren't who they really are sometimes.
And we got a doozy. Okay, we got a doozy here. Lauren Boebert, okay? And we've had you on twice before talking about Lauren Boebert. Dating sugar daddy, dating websites, allegations of drug use, some kind of charter aircraft they had, some kind of private charter jet, all kinds of shenanigans with this Lauren Boebert. But the latest here, now we haven't had you on. A few months back, there was an incident, a domestic violence incident that took place. That was your first tip you got. There was some kind of domestic violence incident, am I correct?
That's right. We got a tip from actually a member of the law enforcement in Garfield County that they had heard some radio traffic, and it mentioned the Boebert's home address. So I'll tell you what happened, tell your listeners what happened. So evidently Boebert's kids were riding up and down the road for those ATV razors, and one neighbor called in and complained because, those ATVs are really loud.
Sure.
And these kids, by the way, are in their teens. They're not supposed to be riding a ATV on a public road. ATVs are pretty popular in Colorado, and that's fine out in the desert or out in the hills. But, running up and down a residential street isn't really a good idea for safety and noise and everything else. So anyway, one of the neighbors called in, a woman, and complained, and the cops didn't do anything. And then another neighbor called in down at the end of his driveway, complaining about the kids running up and down the road. And Jason Boebert, Lauren Boebert's husband, shows up. Evidently he'd been drinking. That's what the witness told me. And berated the local or the neighbor.
Well, one second. Now, Jason Boebert, is this the same Jason Boebert that was exposing himself to children at a bowling alley?
That's correct. That's
really?
Correct. Several years ago, he was cited and actually spent a couple days in jail for whipping it out at a bowling alley. And lo and behold, guess what? Lauren Boebert married the guy. So she was one of the minors that was exposed to, and anyway, she married the guy. So that tells you a little bit about Lauren Boebert.
And Jason, but what does he do for a living today?
Well, nobody knows because, as your listeners may know, there's a fair amount of disclosure required by members of Congress. They have to disclose their sources of income annually. Well, in 2020, her husband was supposedly a $450,000 a year consultant, even though he'd never been consulting in his life, and his income was certainly not that high. Well, in 2021, the disclosure form was marked N/A. We don't know what that means. And so nobody knows what this guy does for a living. I think he takes care of the kids a lot because his wife is gone. But beyond that, we're not really certain.
And who is paying him? Who is paying him that $450,000 a year?
Nobody knows.
Really?
Nobody knows because it's he has an LLC that supposedly receives the money, but he doesn't disclose who his clients are, his customers are. And it's remarkable for a guy that had never consulted to be making $450,000 a year. So, that's a mystery to everybody.
Maybe he's advising them how to get out of going to prison for flashing your penis.
Yeah,
little kids.
yeah. Who knows?
Maybe that's the advice he gives.
I'm not sure he'd be that good, Ed, because he went to jail.
Yeah,
so.
A couple of days. Yeah.
So, but anyway, Jason shows up on the scene and claims that one of the neighbors either struck or grabbed his child, which was not true. No police report about that. There's none of the neighbors all denied that. And these aren't, teenage neighbors or 20-year-old. These are 60 and 70-year-old neighbors that, for goodness sakes, most of them are retired. They just want to live in peace. They got these kids running up and down the road on a loud ATV. And so Jason shows up with one of the neighbors and starts accosting him, uses expletives left and right, tells him to leave his kids alone. And as he's turning around to go back home in his, big F-150, he decides that he's going to back over the neighbor's mailbox in real time while the guy on the phone with 911 is describing it. So anyway, we were able to get all the 911 audio and the police report, and nobody filed any charges because they're afraid of retribution by the Boeberts. But that's the sort of person the Boeberts are, and I don't make any judgments about it other than they don't seem to manage their children. And here's the thing that I think is most irritating, Ed, is there's zero responsibility. Why didn't Jason just show up and say, guys, you know what, I'm sorry. The kids won't do this again. And, here's my number. Call me if there's ever a problem. And then go home like a normal neighbor would do. Instead, it's always somebody else's fault, and he backs over the neighbor's mailbox in retribution.
Yeah, all kidding aside, it's easy to laugh at these hillbillies, these Boeberts. But the thing is, if you go to AmericanMuckrakers.com, you can listen to their 911 calls. And these neighbors were terrified. You can just hear their voices, man. They're exasperated. They're fed up. They mention he's probably drunk. They mention, hey, these Boeberts are armed to the teeth. They're terrorizing this neighborhood.
That's right. That's right. And nobody deserves that. Just because she's a member of Congress doesn't mean she should get away with this stuff. But remarkably, she does, and it's got to come to an end. It will come to an end soon. I hope it doesn't come to an end with guns being fired or anything else. But God only knows.
Yeah. Now you're about my age. Can you imagine, even before 2015, a freshman congresswoman that with these kind of scandals that wouldn't resign in disgrace? We just live in such a crazy, different world.
Well, Ed, you got to bear in mind that the Boeberts had a negative net worth of around $150,000 before in 2020, while she was running for Congress. Okay, and I don't besmirch anybody that's got a negative net worth, but how is it she goes from negative net worth to living in a home worth more than $1 million or close to $1 million, a brand new Escalade SUV, valued 90 or 100 grand. Her husband's making $450 a year. She's making $175 grand a year. So you can see why she would be so desperate to keep the job. I mean, she's gone from, a pretty meager lifestyle to a pretty rich lifestyle. Just this past week, she spent 3 days in Nashville, Tennessee at a guy named Rich. He's a country western singer. And she's flying out there on a private jet. She's spending 3 days, 18 days before an election. And there's pictures of her dancing at this party. And, we've got a video coming out here in a little bit. But she's desperate to keep this gig, and who wouldn't, somebody like her.
By the way, that reminds me, what's going on with the big lawsuit now? She's threatened a defamation lawsuit against David Wheeler. Where does that stand?
We covered that since we filed. Good question, Ed. We filed a defamation lawsuit.
Oh, you did?
About 3 weeks ago.
Oh, I didn't know. I didn't know that. I was talking about the lawsuit she was trying to file against you.
Oh, no. Yeah, that's true. She claimed over and over and over and over again, more than 250 times on national television or national press, that she was going to sue us, sue me personally for defamation, have the local DA toss me in jail for interfering in an election, and then sue the PAC and myself into the ground for defamation and slander. And she never filed it, never heard from a lawyer, nothing. So about 3 weeks ago, I just got fed up with her lying about me and the PAC, and we've suffered severe damages. I mean, over the course of the PAC, we started it in May of 2020, and over the course of a year, we were raising about $16,000 to $17,000 a month average. Some months bigger, some months less. Well, after she came out and slammed us, we were down to $1,200 a month. And, not that I'm intended to get rich off this PAC. Most of it goes back into ads and other expenditures. But, the PAC has been severely financially hit by her. So I filed a 4-count defamation lawsuit against her here in Western North Carolina, seeking damages as well as punitive damages for all the negative things that she said on Sean Hannity's show and Mike Huckabee's show and Tony Lauren. So we're actively involved in litigation against her.
Now, that's interesting. Has she mentioned your name once since that big flurry of threats of a lawsuit, and it just kind of disappeared? Has she mentioned?
Oh yeah, she was on. She was on Hannity's show, and that's the no disrespect intended, but that's the most listened to radio show in America.
Yeah, I know.
He got 3 million listeners a day, and his television show gets 30 million viewers a week. And she was on both those shows, ripping me from left to right, naming me personally. And here's the crux of our lawsuit. Listen, if we put out false information, throw me to the wolves. We did not. Everything we got was from our sources, and it's all recorded. We recorded every single phone call. We recorded every discussion with a source that was published. And her big problem and the crux of our lawsuit is she went out and told the entire world over and over again that I knew personally that those charges were false, and I published them anyway. So she's going to have a difficult time explaining herself to a jury and judge here in North Carolina, because everything that we published was based upon what was told to us by sources that were recorded. So we're looking forward to that lawsuit and getting her served. And can you imagine the deposition, Ed? I think that'll probably be one of the largest pay-per-views in America next year.
That's so true, because you can't ask about her husband's income and stuff like that, because you reported on it. She's claiming your reporting is inaccurate. You can ask all those kind of questions. But she hasn't been served yet.
She has not been served. We sent it. North Carolina allows you to send it certified mail, and it's sitting in the mail or sitting at the post office in Silt, Colorado, because she doesn't want to pick it up. She's pulling a quick dash here and doesn't want to be served. But we'll get her served eventually.
Okay. Now, we never run out of topics when we talk about Lauren Boebert. Now, more recently, there's been a series of I was watching the Jeffrey Dahmer series on Netflix, and people don't know Jeffrey Dahmer was a serial killer. Thank God, they got life in prison, and he died in prison there.